days of winter have finally given way to a warm south wind. With the balmy temperatures, one would think that old man winter's thrown off the blankets of ice and snow and thrown open the windows, allowing the warmth to come in. Now, the one good thing about winter is that it's one season away from spring. Now, there are many signs that spring has sprung. The robins are back. Flowers are starting to push up through the soil. But probably my favorite is knowing that the sap in the maple trees is starting to run. I love having maple syrup on my pancakes and waffles. But before I can have syrup, there is a process that needs to take place. Maple syrup is made from the sap in maple trees. The sap takes food and water to all parts of the tree so the trees can live. As the daytime temperatures go above freezing, the warmer weather and sun warms the trees and the sap begins to flow. It's pushed up from the roots, through the trunk, and out to the limbs where the buds start to form. When the night goes back below freezing, the sap flows back to the roots, where it gathers the food and water from the earth. I know spring is definitely on its way when I see the maple trees being tapped for the sap. It can be collected once the sap begins to flow, right up until the trees begin to bud. See, holes are drilled into the trunk of the maple trees, and a spile or spout is forced into the hole. Because the hole is drilled into the wood, the sap flows out through the spile. Now, a bucket is hung on the hook of the spile to collect the sap. The gathering of maple syrup has come a long way. The first natives in North America would force a stick into the maple tree. The sap would run down the stick and be gathered in a hollowed out log. Well, after that, buckets and metal spiles were introduced. Now, large maple syrup producers use a pipeline where the sap flows through the hoses that are connected to special adapters bored into the trees. The pipeline uses gravity and or a vacuum pump that brings the sap into large vats waiting for the boiling process. Now, in order to get maple syrup, the sap has to be boiled down to become yummy maple syrup. Some people believe that the buds, the limbs, branches, and the trunk of the tree suck the life-giving sap out of the roots. This is just not true. It's the roots of the tree that push the sap out to the outer points. If the roots did not push vitality up and out, the trees would shrivel up and die. Now, the root has two important aspects to make sure the trees grow and thrive. The first is the root acts like an anchor. It spreads out through the ground, wrapping around the rocks and entwined in the earth. This anchor keeps the trees upright. Now, in many cases, the roots keep the trees standing against the strong gust winds. The other important feature of the root system is that it gathers the nutrients and water from the soil, creating a life-giving substance that flows to all parts of the tree. Now, although Jesus wasn't looking at a maple tree, but looking at a grapevine, he knew of this cycle and the relationship the root has to the health and growth of the plant. If there were no roots, there would be no vine. If there were no vine, there would be no branches. If there were no branches, there would be no limbs. And if there would be no limbs, there would be no leaves. And if there were no leaves, there would be no fruit. If the root was not fulfilling its purpose, there'd be no grapes on the table to eat or to be made into wine to drink. You know, John, one of Jesus' closest disciples, quoted Jesus as saying, "Yes, I am the vine, and you are the branches. Those who remain in me, and I in them, will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing." John 15:5. You know, the fruit that Jesus is talking about is not delicious purple grapes or sweet maple syrup, but thoughts, actions, and works that would be in keeping as a follower of Christ. The fruit of the Holy Spirit, or the product that is produced in us because the Holy Spirit is living in us and flowing out through us, is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Oh, you can find that in Galatians 5:22. Now, if we were able to walk beside Jesus and follow him closely and observe his life and his teachings, we could summarize his whole life by the fruit of the Holy Spirit. The Apostle Paul wrote a wonderful prayer to the people in Ephesus. Even now, that prayer can be prayed over us. "I pray that from his glorious, unlimited resources, he will empower you with inner strength through his Spirit. Then Christ will make his home in your hearts as you trust in him. Your roots will grow down into God's love and keep you strong. And may you have the power to understand, as all God's people should, how wide and how long and how high and how deep his love is. May you experience the love of Christ, though it's too great to understand fully. Then you will be made complete with all the fullness of life and power that comes from God." Ephesians 3:16-19. Not only is winter giving way to spring, and there are many signs that the spring is just around the corner, but it's also a miracle from God. So, enjoy this new fresh season. And by the way, pour some maple syrup on your pancakes, or wherever else you may enjoy it. Oh, by the way, have a fantastic